We're ready when you are.
All right, very good. Good morning. It's September 1st, Thursday. This is the Transportation Committee of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments monthly meeting. And this meeting is being held on in a hybrid manner. We will have some members present at the SACOG offices, and we have another group who are participating remotely.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can. Who was that?
Anybody?
Is that Darren? Darren,
Okay, thank you. Yep, Don, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. There was no conversation going on until just now, so you're good. So
Okay.
go ahead and start the meeting. We do have opportunity for the public to participate. You can do so if you're a member of the public and you'd like to share something at the key times during open public comment or on the items that we have on our agenda. You can email lespinoza@sacog.org to submit a written comment. We will also have an opportunity for people who are present in the offices to provide comment, and we'd ask that they submit a written comment card so that we know who they are and that they would like to speak on an item. And then if you're participating remotely, we will have an opportunity for you to raise your hand in the Zoom webinar feature, and then you can comment then. Lynette or Renee, is there anything further on meeting beginning?
No, Chair Saylor, I think we're all set. Thank you for those announcements.
Okay, very good. So we'll now move to the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Chair Desmond, would you be willing to lead us in the pledge?
I'm happy to. Please join me in salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Rich. All right, let's have a roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Saylor. Just a reminder for our members that are joining us in person, when you want to speak, you just press the button on your microphone, and when it lights green, you're ready to speak.
I think we remember.
You remember. Perfect. Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and take roll. Director Branscombe.
Here.
Gog. Absent. Guerrero, absent. Jennings.
Here.
Here.
Lozano.
Here.
Sander.
Here.
Chenier.
Here.
Spokley. Absent Soon.
Here.
Vice Chair Bradford.
Here.
Vice Chair Desmond.
Here.
Chair Saylor.
Here.
And ex officio member Tacker for Benny Paul.
Here.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
And for those of you in the room, please be sure to let Lynette or me know if you want to speak, because it's harder to see you when you're raising your hand than the folks on the screen. So bear with me, and we'll make sure that everybody participates as we can. So we have a time for public comment at this point. This is for items that are not on the agenda for the committee, but hopefully within the scope of the SACOG board and transportation committee. Is there anybody who would like to address us? We'll have other opportunities on individual items in the time ahead. Is there anyone in the room who would like to address the transportation committee this morning?
Chair Saylor, we don't have anyone in the room, but we do have someone online, Mr. Jeffrey Tartagia. Should I go ahead and allow him to speak at this time?
Yes, please. And we'll ask him to have a 3-minute time limit.
Thank you. Mr. Tartagia, you are in the room and ready to speak whenever you are, and there is a 3-minute time limit.
Thank you very much. What I will offer is my first comment is it is extremely difficult to read the agenda, so I will put in a request for next time of getting a large print agenda. It is so legalese words in there that it is very difficult. You also apparently after August 4th adjusted so it's no longer a notification when SACOG has such meetings. I used to have in there so that I could observe when your meetings were taking place, and it was extremely hard today to find this meeting, but I did find it, so I am here. there's a number of things on there I will not be able to respond to, but I do want to thank you guys for doing the work that you do need to do, and especially with some of the changes going on. And since legislatures of our wonderful, should we say, state have finished as of last night or this morning at 1:30 to deal with Diablo, will offer is I'm wondering if on the transportation agendas in the future that some of your projects will be better listed, you know, with the Link 21, with the ongoing I-80 for the next 10 years. Just wondering if ongoing projects will somehow be noted in a better manner as something that is happening. And locally here in Sacramento, all of the Caltrans work and everything else would somehow be mannered. And I'm sure there's other, in the region, there's other jurisdictions of projects that are something that are 5 to 15 years heading. And that's something that I don't see really a manner that in SACOG transportation that you really acknowledge as projects that are ongoing that have long-term implications. And that's my comment right now. And I haven't been talking to you guys for a long time. It's important to let you know that still listening, still want other things to happen and go on. And I appreciate some of the coordination and seeing some of the things that YOLO has done lately has been appreciated and interesting to observe and see. I got your press notice about your new, I believe, deputy director, I believe, coming in there through there. So just letting you know that do watch and listen and observe Jennings and some of the other individuals as you evolve from meeting to here you are in this wonderful situation of going on. And I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Targia. We appreciate your insights, and I hope that our staff heard the comments about access to the information, and I know that they'll work on that topic with you. Are there any other public comments requested?
There are no other public comment.
Okay, very good. We have now a consent calendar items 1 through 6. Are there, let's see, Christina Svensk, are you present, or do you or Mr. Corliss have anything you'd like to remove from the consent agenda?
I'm here. No, I do not.
All right. Is there any member of the committee who'd like to remove anything from the consent agenda? I don't hear anybody or see any indication of that to be the case. Is there any public comment on the consent items?
There's no public comment.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the items 1 through 6 on the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve. Desmond.
Second.
Seconds.
All right. So we have a motion by Desmond, a second by Shanir. Please call.
Shanir
the roll.
always wants to follow Desmond, just so we know.
Okay. It's good
Sounds
that
like a
you've
setup.
established that. There's got to be some kind of situation, some kind of understanding.
Trying to build bridges.
Very good. So let's go ahead and call roll then.
Thank you. Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Gog, absent Guerrero, absent Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lozano,
Aye.
Sander,
Aye.
Shanir,
Aye.
Spokely, absent Soon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond,
Aye.
and Chair Saylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. So that moves us to item 7, the Northern California Mega Region Zero Emission Medium and Heavy Duty Vehicle Study. Is Mr. Shelton the presenter? There he is.
Good morning.
Hello.
I'm here to chat about the study that we'd like to release an RFP for. But first, I'll start off with a little bit about describing the problem before we get into the study's intended solutions. The trucks are a small share of the total vehicles on the road, about 3%, but are responsible for about 1/4 of the greenhouse gas emissions and about half of other emissions, such as NOx and PM 2.5. But finding a way to help turn over our truck fleets to EVs and hydrogen vehicles is a real opportunity. So why don't we already have EV trucks out on the roads? Well, aside from some of the technological issues that are closer to be overcome, there are significant coordination issues between public and private investment. This mega regional coordination study can help overcome some of the classic zero emission vehicle or ZEV chicken and egg dilemmas. Several years ago, SMUD interviewed a number of fleet managers across the county who shared that they were discouraged by the risks of buying zero emission vehicles, such as their trucks, without supporting infrastructure on our highways for those longer truck routes. Public investment, likewise, might wait for private industry to purchase those trucks before installing large megawatt DC fast charger stations to ensure their use and bang for the buck for our public investment. As an integrated approach, as outlined in this study's scope of work, we should be able to overcome this chicken and egg dilemma. This study casts a pretty wide net across the Northern California mega region with support from our mega region partners, MTC, SJCOG, so through the Bay Area and San Joaquin counties, as well as our partner utilities such as SMUD and PG&E and our regional transportation planning agencies in El Dorado and Placer counties. We're hoping to identify at least 11 priority stations along the key interstates and state highways to facilitate those long, medium, and heavy-duty truck trips to accelerate fleet turnover to zero-emission vehicles. While the map that's attached to my report shares some initial locations identified in a 2020 study, largely led by utilities, based on the kind of energy needs and energy infrastructure investments they would need along the interstates, that's only a starting point for us. This study will bring together a diverse set of partners to assess the viability of many locations and prioritize their development. The scope includes some suggested criteria to help guide their decisions, such as the demand for energy, truck volumes and parking, the constraints and costs, such as grid improvements, right-of-way, fleet access, and multimodal conflicts in those areas, as well as the benefits, such as multimodal route improvements, emission reductions from fleet turnover in disadvantaged communities, and the future mobility hub proximity. There's an awful lot of synergies there that we can take advantage of. So staff is recommending to release the RFP for the study and delegate authority to the executive director to negotiate and execute a contract. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the scope of work.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions for Mr. Shelton?
I have a question.
Yes, Director Branscombe.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you give a finer definition of what you mean by medium duty and heavy duty?
So there are many classes of trucks. So you can see, say, very long, they're called ST2A trucks that might have multiple trailers up to, say, class 8. And then you have smaller medium duty trucks, perhaps drayage trucks that are coming out of ports that are a little shorter range. So anything beyond like a typical delivery truck you might see along your city streets.
Follow-up question. Is there anybody manufacturing an EV or hydrogen powered truck of those classes?
Yes, there are, but that's part of our chicken and egg dilemma as far as fleet turnover to those larger vehicles. Are they waiting for the infrastructure, or are we waiting for them to buy the vehicles before we put in the infrastructure? So we're hoping to resolve that issue.
Okay.
Director Branscombe, just a flag for your region, your Yuba Sutter region. I don't have to tell you or anybody else from up there, including Director Bradford, you've got a lot of trucks and you've had a lot more trucks over the last few years, right? We actually have a study with Sutter County that we've awarded that's underway now, looking at both truck parking, because truck parking by small independent operators that are frankly driving older, dirty trucks that are going to be illegal soon. Parking is an issue. So we're looking at with Sutter County, or Sutter County is leading the study on, could you do both a truck parking facility and a hydrogen fueling electrification pilot project? Highway 99 is actually one of the corridors in the state. So it's early days for sure, but the technology is out there. And this, I give credit to our staff as well. As you can see from this item, this is actually a mega regional effort here with the Bay Area and Northern San Joaquin Valley as well.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Director Lozano, you have your hand up.
I do. Thank you for the opportunity. I just had a question. I actually yesterday had the opportunity to meet with our local franchisee for solid waste management. And we looked at a rear load rear load dump truck that was electric, and it was made by kind of a huge company. But some of what I heard yesterday was that the industry in building these are kind of everybody's kind of seeing what the other one's doing. So my question is, in this, are you going to look at not only the long haul type trucks, but also in town side loading trash trucks and those things as well?
So we will be looking at primarily commercial freight, but we will also be looking at the benefits, the shared benefits of where energy improvements and these stations may be able to co-locate and benefit from each other's investments. So while we're not primarily doing public fleet turnover studies, we are hopeful that our work will help leverage their work.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, this Mr. Soon.
Thank you, Chair Saylor. Yeah, it's pretty easy to see. This is a big bang for the buck type of analysis. When you look at only 3% of registered vehicles, but contributing 23% of our greenhouse gas emissions, this is a great opportunity for us to plan for the future here. So I look forward to all our jurisdictions being part of this, implementing whatever plan comes out of this. So I'll wholeheartedly move this forward when the opportunity arises. Thank you.
All right, very good. Are there any other directors with questions or comment with questions before we turn to public comment? I don't see anybody, and Lynette, I'm relying on you to help me if there's somebody in the room who's raising a hand. Okay, very good. I think we'll go to public comment. Do we have any requests for public comment on this topic?
We do have a request for public comment from Jeffrey Tartagia. Shall I go ahead and allow him to speak at this time?
Yes, and yes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Tartagia, you are in the Zoom room and able to speak whenever you're ready.
And Jeffrey, if you can try to focus your comments in about 3 minutes, that would be great.
Not a problem, Mr. Sawyer. My comment is, can I ask, my understanding is today and tomorrow in Southern California, there is actually an operating fleet, should we say, infrastructure that is being examined. Just wondering if indeed, it seems like we have nothing in Northern California in that manner, but have we been able to observe or learn anything about that operation in Southern California that is operating as apparently a fully vested structure? And I do not know the specifics. I just saw a notice about it and was just curious as whether SACOG is aware of it. And that's the end of my comment.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comment requests?
There's no other public comment.
Okay, very good. Is there, I think, Darren, you indicated you'd like to move this item.
Please, I'll move the item. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Lozano.
Lozano seconded. So motion by Director Soon, second by Director Lozano to accept the recommendation as stated. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Director Branscombe.
Aye.
Gog. Absent. Guerrero. Absent. Jennings.
Yes.
Joyner.
Aye.
Lozano.
Aye.
Sander. Director Sander, if you're there, could you indicate your vote, please? I'll come back to him. Chenier.
Aye.
Spokley.
Yes.
Soon.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford.
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond.
Aye.
Chair Saylor.
Aye.
And Director Sander, coming back to you again. If you're there, could you indicate your vote? Okay, I'll mark him absent. Motion carries.
Very good.
Chair
Thank you.
Saylor,
Yes.
if you don't mind, before you move on, I should have mentioned this, a great advertisement, speaking of trucks and freight, for the continuation of this committee meeting into the lunch. We have Tony Bourne from the Fresno Council of Governments coming to talk about inland ports and stretching all the way up into this region. And part of that strategy is both an intermodal rail strategy to get the rail investment up the valley to move more goods on rail from Southern California, but when they flip over to trucks, to make sure that they're doing everything they can to have zero emission trucks on the other end and with multiple ports. So anyway, just a teaser, should be pretty interesting. It's gotten a lot of attention at the state level and the national level. We're a small investor in that because it's going to hopefully have a beneficial impact on the valley. So
Well, that's great, James. Thank you for that. And I just make a comment. I'm really pleased to have SACOG take a leadership coordinating role on this project that we just acted on. So I think that's a very good manifestation of our mega region partnerships. So very good job. That brings us to item 8, the revolving match program guidelines, and Mr. Doherty will be presenting, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the Transportation Committee. Chris Doherty, Funding and Grants Program Manager for the Transportation Group. The action item in front of you this morning is the revised guidelines for the revolving match program. The revolving match program is designed to apply a strategic amount of funding to increase competitiveness of projects that are seeking federal or state funding. As the name applies, this program is meant to be run continuously, approximately every 6 months. This program has a budget through the regional funding program of around $19 to $31 million over the 2-year timeframe. Applicants can apply for projects up to $4 million, and if awarded by SACOG, they get a conditional award. So if they are successful, we will program the money to the projects. But if they're not successful, then that money goes back into the pot for other projects that are seeking those funds. This is the second cycle of the program. Remember last month we adopted, you guys approved staff recommendations to move forward 4 projects to fund those projects to a total of $11.5 million. If those projects are successful, that they would leverage our funding to bring in approximately $312 million in project funding into our region. So this program has a very large impact if successful. When we launched this program in April, it was intended to be an iterative program that would see adjustments through the first few cycles. So for this cycle, we have made some adjustments from the last cycle, largely in the prioritization metrics. Instead of relying on the SACOG PPA tool, we are now asking applicants to select between 2 and 4 policy outcomes that are from the 2020 SACOG MTP SCS that overlap with their funding program that they've identified. And we're asking the draft approximately a 2-page narrative that would of how they are addressing that. The application for this is really meant to be incredibly streamlined. There's a 2-page fillable PDF along with that 2-page narrative that I just referenced. And it's really designed either to be able to cut and paste from an existing application that a project applicant would have, or if it's a new project starting from scratch, that new 2-page narrative could really be used as an executive summary or an introduction to a larger application. So we're trying to make sure that there's not a single-use work product coming out from our grant writers. So today we're asking the committee to take an action to recommend to the board to approve the Cycle 2 revolving match guidelines so we can release a call for projects at the end of the month. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Well, Chris, we'll turn to the committee members in just a sec, but this range of funding of 19.2 to 31.8 million. Can you explain what your sense of that is? That's a pretty big range.
Sure. So when we launched this program in April, we also approved a draft funding budget for the regional program. And because of this program, it's flexible in nature, we decided to put a range on it instead of a hard cap number. It's between 15 to 25% of the funding round budget of the $115 million to the regional program. So when we launched it, we put that range in there so that we had some flexibility to move more projects, because if we do over program this or we use more of these funds, they are better leveraged and bring in external dollars into our into our region.
So
That
how
answer your
will
question?
you, it does, but when will the decision be made on what the amount is? Is it based on what the quality of the proposals is? Is that what your thought is?
Yeah, we'll be bringing back the award, the staff's recommendations for awards approximately every 6 months. For this next cycle, we're envisioning around the end of the calendar year for the next round of these, and we'll be checking in on that number and the amount of awards per award.
Okay, thank you. And I
Mhm.
appreciate your indulgence. So colleagues, anybody have questions on this item? Lynette, is anyone raising their hands from the committee? Okay, is there any public comment?
There's no public comment.
All right, is there a motion? I think Mr. Branscombe is eager to make a motion. Is that true?
Yes, move the matter forward.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Director Bradford will second.
Excellent. So we have a motion by Branscombe, second by Bradford to approve the recommendation for the guidelines for the next cycle of the revolving match program. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Director Branscombe.
Yes.
Gog. Absent Guerrero, absent Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lozano,
Aye.
Sander, absent Chenier,
Aye.
Spokely,
Yes.
Soon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond,
Aye.
and Chair Saylor.
Aye,
Thank you. Motion carries.
thank you. It moves us to item 9, the MTIP amendment.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, committee. My name is Jose.
I'm
Am I
sorry.
coming through?
We have apparently Director Gog has joined us and has his hand raised. Does he need to say something or just want to record a vote?
We'll move him into the meeting. It looks like he's been moved in. Director Gog, did you want to make a comment or just note for the record that you are present?
Thank you very much. I've known there for a while, but I couldn't get into the system, so I wasn't able to vote for any of the things. I voted yes on both the items.
Okay, thank you. I'll make sure the record reflects that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much. Okay. Please proceed. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, good morning. This is actually my first committee presentation in this room. Could I check audio? Am I all right?
We can hear you.
Fantastic. A quick introduction. I am Jose Luis Casares. I manage the project delivery team, which includes the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Briefly about this item, staff is recommending that the Transportation Committee recommend to the board that the board adopt a resolution. And that resolution takes 4 actions. The first is it would adopt the 2023 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Second, it would adopt amendment number 2 to the current 2020 Metropolitan Transportation Plan / Sustainable Community Strategy. Third, that it would adopt the accompanying air quality conformity determination. And fourth, that the board would delegate authority to the executive director to make any necessary technical edits to secure state and federal approval. I'm going to jump into some background. The Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program is my favorite acronym here at SACOG. It's the MTIP. You can think of it as the first 4 years of our long range plan, which is the other acronym, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Sustainable Community Strategy, MTPSCS. But you wouldn't just say it's the first 4 years. It's the first 4 years plus a lot of detail. No projects go in the MTIP unless they have full funding or they can show full funding for their phases. These are projects that are regionally significant or federally funded. And it gets a lot more scrutiny when you try to get into the MTIP the first 4 years. Now, the MTIP is always being updated. We're doing an administrative modification to it every month. So the MTIP, I feel like, is always current, yet every 2 years, we're required by state and federal rules to re-examine the whole MTIP, every single project, and adopt it anew. For this, so in doing this, we actually add 2 more years. So the new MTIP is going to be called the 23 MTIP. It'll contain the federal fiscal years 23, 24, 25, and 26. The MTIP is an important document for administering our region's federal funds. Some of these funds SACOG directly administers, some of these we do not. And yet we control them by controlling this document. Some funds that you would see in here are the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Fund, Regional Surface Transportation Program, which has been going by the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program title lately, the State Transportation Improvement Program. I could go on. It also contains all of Caltrans's rehab work on our highways through the State Highway Operations Protection Program, also known as the SHOP. All of our federal bridge work is in the MTIP. All of our federal transit work, FTA 5307, and on and on. Victoria is going to be speaking. It's all of the active transportation program projects funded with federal funds. The MTIP is large. Without the MTIP, none of these important projects get to move forward to the next phase. It's a critical document. A little bit more background. Before we sent this out for review, our staff reviewed all of the projects to get individually and as a sum for accuracy, financial constraint, and we ran them through a transportation model, which then gave us information for us to determine air quality conformity, whether we're still on track for clean air. We received public comments. The comments were some corrections, some clarifications. We've responded to all of them. And this document includes those edits, which we believe were minor, did not affect our quality conformity, did not affect financial constraint. A little bit more background. This whole process we kicked off back in January when we asked our sponsors to update every single one of their projects, which is no small request to our cities, counties, Caltrans District 3, our transit operators, PCTPA and EDCTC staff. Then when we sent it out for review, we still needed to rely on more help from our own Caltrans, Federal Highway Administration, and Federal Transit Administration, who reviewed this during public review. And we're at the end of this long process, so I have to say some names. I got to give thanks to Dustin Foster, who did a lot of this work at the beginning, reviewing projects, taking this for public review. Barbara Von Bechtold, who reviewed every single transit project. Sam Shelton, who is on the MTP team, we coordinated with Sam to make sure that our projects were staying consistent with the adopted MTP. We do not want these two documents to fall apart from each other. Thank you, Sam. Renee DeVere Oki is responsible for the whole air quality conformity analysis document. And she got some help from Victoria Cacciatore also here. We have brand new staff, Ibrahim Itani, who took every one of these regionally significant projects and modeled them in a very complicated computer simulation. And he did this with coaching by our veteran, Kyle Shipley. We're not done. After the board takes action. This would be where I'd lead applause, and I'm going to do it now. Thank you to all those people. Thank you. This is a lot of work, and it's coming to the end. And so I do want to say thank you, because I will not be coming back before the committee for an MTIP item for a while after this. But this item this MTIP is not done. It still has a ways to go. After our board acts, we'll send it to Caltrans, who will then send it for statewide review with all the other tips from California. And then we will expect FHWA, FTA, and EPA approval December 16th. So again, SACOG staff is recommending that the committee recommend that the board adopt the resolution that does those 4 actions. The reason why we need to empower the executive director, sometimes towards the end, someone notices something and they need it changed. We want to be able to make those changes technically with delegated action. And that completes my report, Chair Saylor.
Thank you very much, Jose. Very good. So we have it before us. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. My only question is, did you leave anybody out when you were thanking people for their
I certainly
effort?
did. Many managers and our executive director also participated at a strategic level.
Well, the rest of them will find you later. So that's fine. Are there any public comments on this topic before we take action?
There's no public comment.
All right. Is there a motion?
Joyner moves approval.
I think that was Joyner.
Correct.
Desmond seconds.
Okay. Is there a second?
Desmond seconds.
Desmond seconds. Thank you very much. Joyner makes the motion and Director Desmond second. Now please call the roll.
Thank you. Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Skog,
Yes.
Guerrero absent, Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lozano,
Aye.
Sander absent, Chenier,
Aye.
Spokely,
Yes.
Soon,
I want to commend Jose for his work too as well. And with that, aye.
Vice Chair Bradford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond,
Aye.
and Chair Saylor.
Aye. Thank you,
Motion
everybody.
carries.
Very good. So that brings us to item 10. This is Victoria Cacciatore on draft mode shift program funding guidelines. Used to have a different title.
Yes, and also always a challenge to follow Jose Luis because he is such an accomplished presenter, but I will do my best. So yes, I'm Victoria Cacciatore, and I am a senior transportation analyst here at SACOG, and I'm here today to present the draft guidelines for the mode shift program. This is a 6-county mode shift program that aims to invest in, to test, and to expand new and existing programs that can reduce car trips and provide new mobility solutions. This funding source can also support small non-infrastructure programs, events, quick build projects, tactical urbanism, or other projects that are also going to help move us closer to those goals of reducing car trips and providing new mobility solutions. This is largely a refresh of similarly focused funding programs from 2018, though with some proposed changes to streamline and remove barriers for application. We're using one application type for all projects, and that's for new to the region projects, and then also expanding or continuing existing projects and programs. We've elevated equity to a scored criterion in the project selection. Whereas before it was a question that was asked of all projects but not evaluated. And also recommend eliminating the match requirement. There's also a clarification about who eligible partners and lead applicants are, identifying that many of our cities and counties had expressed how important it is for them, for business districts and other nonprofits to be able to lead this type of work in helping address mobility needs at a local level. To update these guidelines that you have in front of you today in the attachment, we've been holding one-on-one conversations with potential project sponsors since July to learn what projects and programs have momentum both locally and regionally, and also to learn more about how some of our transportation management agencies and cities and counties have been adapting their mode shift efforts to changes from the pandemic. We released a draft version of the guidelines for comment in mid-August, and we're able to make edits to the draft based on partner comments. So clarifying the process for applying, some questions about project eligibility in the review process, and how equity was discussed in the application. We also shared this at the August Regional Planning Partnership meeting and the Transit Coordinating Committee to make sure that we're reaching as wide of an audience as possible to let them know about this funding opportunity. In the guidelines, you'll see that we're proposing a 2-month application period. These are small projects and they have a small application to complement their smaller size. They have a minimum project size of $25,000 and a max of $250,000 that they could get for grant funding. And the 2-month period that we have is a little bit longer than what they might have with a typical round, but that's to leave more time for conversations with SACOG staff about how they might find different implementing partners or develop the performance measures that are best suited for their projects. And following this, the schedule also includes staff bringing a funding recommendation to the January Board of Directors. And so with that, I would leave with the recommendation or the staff recommendation that the Transportation Committee recommend that the board approve the draft mode shift program funding guidelines and authorize the release of the request for grant applications. But I am also happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Very clear. Are there questions from the committee members? I don't see any. Are there any requests for public comment?
There's no public comment.
All right, we're ready for a motion then. Okay. Mr. Chenier, are you about to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
Very good.
Second.
And soon second. So Chenier motion, and Director Soon made the second. So please call the roll.
Thank you, Director Branscombe,
Yes.
Gog,
Yes.
Guerrero absent, Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lozano,
Aye.
Sander absent, Chenier,
Aye.
Spokley. Director Spokley, could you indicate your vote, please?
Yes, Lynette, sorry about that.
Thank you, no problem. Soon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond,
Aye.
and Chair Saylor.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. So now we're to item 11. This is I think this is listed as an informational item. The idea is that we'll have a conversation and give the staff our sense of the interest of the committee in this, I think, very interesting topic that they've got for us. Mr. Darty, are you prepared?
I am, Director Sutter. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me share my screen quickly with a PowerPoint. Sorry, bear with me for a second here. Can you see my screen or are you seeing my notes screen?
We don't see either.
Don't see either. Okay. All right.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay on that. So yeah, good morning. The info item in front of you today is a presentation on how we are implementing the policy framework and review the policy framework for the 22-23 regional funding round. And we're going to be seeking your input on how we implement that program. In the fall of 2020, the board adopted a policy framework for the funding program. That framework was the outcome of a very extensive stakeholder outreach process, about 6 months long. And that new framework created two main programs under the regional program title, the Maintenance and Modernization Program and the Transformative Program. And that fall, we launched those programs with a call for projects, and they also went in tandem with the Community Design Program. Those two programs were really designed and took considerable stakeholder effort to meet the needs of our jurisdictional partners when it comes to streamlined application processes and a more consistent funding stream. The Maintenance and Modernization Program was really designed for your smaller program projects, your fix-it-first or innovative non-capacity increasing projects that were under $5 million. And this included, again, that more streamlined application that was previously used. The Transformative Program, it was intended for all capacity increasing projects and any projects over $5 million. The application's a little larger for that one because of the amount of funding that goes along with it. In the fall of 2020, again, the board released a call for projects, and then in April, the board approved the staff's funding recommendations of approximately $198 million in projects. So fast forward to this round, in this winter of 2021, staff returned to the board with a timeline for the next funding round and to recommend carrying that same framework forward from the previous round because of that extensive outreach and for consistency's sake for our partner jurisdictions. The feedback we received was positive, so we moved forward with that approach. At the same time, we've seen some massive changes in the funding landscape that have happened with the adoption of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and a state's budget surplus. So with that, with April, we came to the board with a draft funding budget for the regional program and guidelines for the revolving match program, which I just spoke about earlier. The draft budget for the program was $130 million approximately, and that was based on 2 years of SACOG's funding apportionment. This is smaller than the previous round, which funded 3 years of SACOG's apportionment. So in the revolving match program was designed and approved also as part of the regional element. The budget provided $115 million for the regional program. That includes the programs of maintenance and modernization, transformative, and revolving match. But with that reduced funding capacity, we are seeking the committee's feedback on 3 possible options to implement this round. Option 1 is to remove the transformative program altogether, focusing strictly on maintenance and modernization, revolving match, would have community design. Option 2 would be to limit the transformative program to 25% of the regional program budget, and the remaining budget will go to the revolving match and maintenance modernization programs. Option 3 is to make no changes and move forward with the regional program. Staff has been exploring the 25% cap on the transformative program, and to put that into context, the 2020 funding round did an almost even split. I think it was 49% to 51%, transformative 49% of the funding, 51% to the maintenance and modernization program. On the right side here, you're seeing with the inclusion of the revolving match program, what this round would look like for approximate totals. 25% of the total would be about just under $29 million for the transformative program. Over the past few months, staff has been conducting considerable stakeholder outreach with the partners in the 4-county region. This has consisted of one-on-one meetings. We've had 16 so far. I believe 17th is later on today, with a couple more later on next week. We have overwhelmingly heard that that the primary needs of our local partners are mostly in the fix-it-first arena. They're really concerned about their maintenance projects and moving those forward. So we've sought their feedback on a more maintenance modernization focused round, and that feedback has been generally received, has been consistent and positive for this approach. So also included in the report is the revised policy framework for the funding round moving forward. That overall framework remains mostly unchanged from the previous round. The edits that were completed were mostly focused on updating the language around equity and reordering for readability, but they are largely unchanged. They are available for your view as attachments 2 and 3 in the staff report, 3 being the red line version of it, so you can compare. So this policy framework, along with an updated budget, we are anticipating to return to the committee and boards in October for adoption and for a call for projects. We are anticipating that call for projects to happen towards the end of October or maybe the first week in November, with applications due toward the end of January, the beginning of February. We are anticipating having staff recommendations for those funding decisions in front of the committee and board by May of 2023. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And what I'm going to ask is, I'm going to first ask if Mr. Corliss has anything he'd like to add. And then colleagues, if we have any clarifying questions, perhaps we can focus just on any clarifying questions, then hear public comment, and then have a dialogue, a conversation about any interests and perspectives that you have. If that sounds okay, Mr. Corliss, do you have any comments that you'd like to share with the committee before we proceed?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Saylor. So I think Chris did a very nice job setting up what's in front of you in this item, which was intended as information discussion for you all to provide us some feedback. As you know, we overhauled, as Chris said, those funding programs 2 years ago in 2020. We did that with a lot of input from a lot of our partners. And I think we came out with a process and some programs that I think were simpler, more transparent, more streamlined, and gave our local sponsor agencies a bit more certainty and predictability, which is what we know they want. And as I'm sure those of you who are around remember, we had a big discussion around a formula, right? And a population-based formula. So fast forward, our staff here has really been rolling this out. We've had your feedback over the last 9 months to basically proceed with that same framework, with the addition of this revolving match, which is another idea that came out of our outreach in 2020, the revolving match program, again, that you just approved last month. The challenge that Chris is setting up for you is you have less money, right? So 200 million in the 2020 cycle, 130, 115 this time around. And so with less money, the question is, and the maintenance and modernization program is intended to and is set up to be a little bit more of a streamlined, you set your priorities, say number 1, number 2, number 3. That I think has a bit more certainty. Transformative is bigger, transformative is bigger project costs. It includes capacity projects that are more complicated. So that with roughly half as much money, right? There could be twice as many applications turned away. So one way to limit that or manage it is to have a greater focus or an exclusive focus on maintenance and modernization. Try not to disappoint too many of your jurisdictions and the partner agencies, while at the same time allow people to just focus on that potentially with that option, right? And get some of those complete streets and safety and pothole projects done and out the door and funded. So I'm just trying to set up the challenge we have for you. I'm very aware too that we've got a letter from the city of Sacramento that just came in earlier that we've shared with the committee that talks about something a little bit different, which is, can we rethink some of the criteria, which was not what we were planning on doing, but I want to acknowledge that letter and that request coming in too. So we had been sort of moving along here and actually reaching out to a lot of your staff and getting a lot of feedback. I think people are excited around the region for this funding availability, but they're also very aware that we've got just smaller budget and more constraints this time. So we're looking for your input today.
Very good. Thank you, James. So colleagues, what my proposal is that we hear if you have any clarifying questions, then hear public comment, and then have our conversation. Are there any clarifying questions for James or Chris? Let's see, nobody's stepping up. Okay, Lynette, are there any requests to address us from the public?
I don't see any public comment requests.
Okay, so we'll note that we did receive a letter from the city of Sacramento, and we all have that. All right, so who would like to? Is there any burning issues somebody would like to share? What are your thoughts, Director Bradford? You're first up.
So not necessarily any burning issues, but just my thoughts. I do like the approach of capping it at 25%. I think it still allows for those kinds of projects in the region, while at the same time really focusing on, maybe where some of the greater need is with respect to this program. That was kind of when I read through the material, that was my feeling. I did check with staff in Yuba County, and they were on board with that approach as well. So.
Okay, other thoughts? Thank you, Gary. Anybody have their hand up? Jay?
Yeah, thank you, Don. First want to acknowledge the work that went into this, both by staff and by a lot of members of the board last time around. And I think the result was a better process, particularly with the increased communication that we talked about, with some increased level of certainty that folks could get. And I want to acknowledge also, the jurisdictions, mine included, that have come forward and said, we like what we've done. We think we can do more. And I think that now that we've had a couple of years of experience with the process, we should take a look at it. I don't want to hold up the overall process that we have now, and however we choose option A, B, or C. I think that's a separate discussion from what I'm going to propose here, which is that we put together, maybe it's part of the transportation committee. I would look to you, Don, about how we best can do that, but put together a working group that starts to look at the criteria over time that we're using in making these selections. That looks at the level of certainty that people can have over a period of years, which may go beyond where we actually have funding for at this point. But again, when that funding does appear, then our jurisdictions could know we'll be in line for that, and setting our priorities will keep constant over a period of time. So we know that that money will be coming as long as there's a pot that we can be using for this. So what I want to propose is, and again, I'm not sure of the structure of the format. I would leave that to the chair here, but that we do have a working group working with staff, doing outreach to our other jurisdictions, should they choose to be part of it, where we come back probably in Q1 of next year which doesn't disrupt the current process, but says, let's look at potential tweaks that we can go forward with that would address some of these concerns that certainly my jurisdiction has and that other jurisdictions have as well.
Interesting. So the idea would be that work would inform future funding rounds. Okay.
Correct. I don't want to get into a situation that we're in now where if we took up some changes now, and I was part of it last time, and we spent a good 6 months, as I'm sure you remember.
Yeah.
I don't want to delay the process to do this, but I think we can do it concurrently. So we have our process that we've set up that moves forward as we speak. We make a choice about A, B, or C, but at the same time, there's a working group that's formed that does outreach with a very specific charge that goes back to the concerns that people had last time. How has that been affected? How effective have we been at meeting those concerns? And what can we do better moving forward? And I know there's some questions. Like for me, I definitely think housing and RHNA should be a part of the criteria here. I know that there are some legal challenges with that, but that would be something that we could talk about. What are the pieces that we should be looking at? Thank you.
Good. Thank you. And we have Director Desmond, Vice Chair Desmond, and Director Soon. So,
thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to piggyback on Member Director Chenier's comments. I think that's a great approach. I agree not to disrupt the work for this year, but prospectively sitting down with that work group that, like he describes, and just support that approach.
Very good. Thank you, Rich. Darren?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Saylor. Yeah, likewise, I would also support Director Chenier's comments. We had quite the discussion last time, and I raised concern about some of our membership not being heard, and so I really appreciate Director Chenier's comment about establishing this parallel track to reach out to our memberships and just see how we've done and what can we do to make sure that all our memberships can feel like they're heard and have their concerns addressed. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a interesting topic and makes sense. So I think that does give us a way of dealing with the new way of looking at issues. That's good. Vice Chair Bradford mentioned that he's supportive of the idea of setting aside 25% of the funds for the transformational category. How do others feel about that? We have these three options that staff have presented. You have anybody disagree with that point? Do you have another point you'd like to make? Chris, you look like you're about ready to say something.
Well, no, Director Bradford made a lot of sense. I received that very well.
Okay, very good. Lynette, are there any other directors who have a comment that I'm not seeing?
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay. All right. So I take that as concurrence with both of the major points that have been raised. One that Gary brought forward of having the focus be about the 25% for the for the transformational in this, kind of flesh that one out. And then Jay's comments that have been supported of looking at some additional criteria and looking at a little bit deeper, doing what lessons learned and assessment for the future rounds. And we can talk with James and Christina and see how we can develop a parallel process to take a look at that for the future. James and Chris, does that make sense to you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
James, do you get what you, is there
Yeah,
somebody?
yeah, no, it's very helpful. Definitely, if anybody else has any thoughts on the committee, on the various, the emphasis, right, between these two programs, that'd be great to hear. I'm sure you'll keep the microphone open there, Chair Saylor. I do want to say just a couple of things on the Director Chenier's proposal and this, and I know you all know this who went through this in 2020, but we spent a lot of time and we heard a lot of concerns, right, from a lot of our local partners about the funding round and did a lot to overhaul the programs. We have a revolving match program, right? Idea that came out of those concerns. You again proved it last time. You proved the guidelines this morning to put money down as leverage, right? We heard that getting more predictability through multi-cycle awards and commitments over multiple funding cycles, which is always interesting because you're basically trading off, you're trading off next funding round's capacity, right, to provide more predictability. But we went forward with that, and the city of Sacramento got a $9 million+ award for Broadway. Regional Transit got the largest award in the funding round to replace light rail vehicles, and Yolo County got a multi-cycle award as well. We have a maintenance and modernization program that is in front of you, which allows and really requires local jurisdictions and partnerations to set priorities. So what's your number one, number two, number three? Because giving us multiple applications and knowing that we can only fund half of them and we don't know what the priorities are was hard, and we get into a bit of miscommunication. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands we heard a lot of that. We were engaged 2 years ago, and I think we and your staff were engaged in reforming a funding round that I think met many of those. What it didn't do, right, was provide a formula. And what we now know is we can't do that. And I love, believe me, I love the idea of putting in housing and growth as a criteria. But right now, under our current federal corrective action, the Bay Area is in some hot water because of that approach. So I just want us to be eyes wide open, both about how we revamped and what I fear is the real issue is lack of funding. The real issue is we don't have available resources, we don't have flexible funds. So that said, I like Director Chenier's idea. I think we should absolutely relook at all of this. And I also would say too, we can start that on this process you mentioned, Director Chenier. I would recommend you and we think about it in the context of the next long range plan. What is it that we can do with our available resources to support our long range plan? I know that sounds like a simple idea, but I do think that maybe even the criteria and looking through the blueprint as we update it and embedding it in that, so that in some ways it becomes natural what we want to fund out of the blueprint, right? And that is a process which really helps set up that lens and that criteria, whether it is growth or housing or safety or trucks on 2 lanes roads or whatever it is, understanding that we've got a lot of federal and state expectations on that money. So appreciate the conversation. Would love any other further feedback on the question in front of you on the relative emphasis. And you've got our commitment to work on rethinking this with you and others in the months ahead.
If I could add, James, so I want to note what a great job staff has done making the transition, doing all of the outreach, which I think created a better process. I just think there's continuous learning potential here, and we can always do better to meet the needs of the jurisdictions. I would ask that the jurisdictions who have thoughts about this, and if there's a working group, we can set up some timelines, but really think through it and provide some feedback now about lessons learned along the way, how they've done and what they'd like to see going forward. I hope we can start there with some internal study.
Okay, very good. I think point well made.
Thank you, Don.
Are there any further comments before we turn to the next item? And I appreciate all the points that James and Jay have both made. Any further comments from anyone? Okay, very good. Thank you. And this will come back to us in October. And I think we've had an opportunity to think this through carefully, and that parts of the dialogue that have happened, I think we're very productive, and we'll continue to work on this in the next cycle. All right, let's go to item 12. And this is our final item today. And those of you, if any of you do have to leave, please know that there is an additional presentation at noon, a lunchtime activity that James mentioned earlier. So item 12 is the working draft REAP. It's listed as Casey Luzon.
Yes. Good morning, Chair Saylor and members of the committee. This is an information item to go over the working draft racial equity action plan for your committee, with a focus on the goals and objectives that are literally now being refined so that they can move forward to the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group. What I want to do first is just give a little bit of background of how we got to this point, and then we can dive into the goals and objectives. So when your board adopted in February a racial equity statement of change and commitment, there were a number of commitments in that statement that SACOG started acting on right away. And the first of those was to listen and learn so that we could start to develop a racial equity action plan. And so with that, we hired a racial equity consultant to do a number of listening sessions with our stakeholders in the region. We reached out to city and county managers to ask them or their designees to attend sessions, our RTPA partners, our transit agencies, community-based organizations, your SACOG staff. And we also held one-on-one sessions with the members of the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group to ask for their thoughts on how SACOG can follow through on the commitments of its racial equity statement and put that all into an action plan. So we did have really great participation. Over 80 people participated in those listening sessions. And from all of that, we developed the working draft racial equity action plan that is in your packet. This action plan is, as much as possible, a direct translation of all of the learnings we got out of the listening session. We presented this action plan to the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group at its July meeting. And then we also shared it back out to all of our stakeholders to ask for feedback, any conversations that anyone wanted to have over the month of August. And we are now actively trying to finalize this action plan. The focus that the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group had was to look at the goals and objectives that were in the plan, and to provide for us their sense of what should be prioritized, what are they excited about, what they think might be challenging or controversial, if there's anything missing. And for the most part, we did have some feedback on what members are excited about. So right now, what we are doing with that, and with any input that we receive from this committee, as well as what we've received from Policy and Innovation, and this afternoon from Lunar, we'll use that to help us to finalize this plan. So you may see some objectives moving up and down the list. They will also get honed in and more specific. So we're trying to turn them into SMART objectives. That means they will have time associated with them. They are going to be specific. We will have some actions associated with them. The whole point of that, I'm sorry, that wasn't a quick overview of where we were at, but if you'll bear with me. After this round of presenting it to the committees and the work that staff is doing, we will bring, our target is to bring a final version of this action plan to the September 30th meeting of the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group. The goal for them to finalize it there and to move it forward to policy and innovation in October to recommend to your board for adoption. So that is where we've been, where we are, where we are going. And what I would like to do now, if there are no questions on process, is to give you an overview of the goals and objectives.
Okay, any questions? Why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Chair Saylor, it
Casey.
looks like Director Jennings has a question.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to kind of tag in on this because I've been the chair of the Race Equity and Inclusion Board for a minute now. And this is a very good working group of SACOG members and of community members. It's an excellent group and they're doing really hard work. And it was great that we got 80 people who participated in our listening groups. That was incredible. But what this group really wants from this board is to make sure that they're moving in the direction that we want to move in. So when we talk about like, what are you excited about? Are you really involved and engaged if we read through the materials? And what are you excited about that they're doing, of the work that they're doing? What is the thing that's most challenging or controversial for you that you can talk to us about and help us to understand how we might look at it in a different way if it's not in the direction that you want? And then I think the last thing is what's missing as we move into 2023 and we want to prioritize and develop the strategic action plan. What's missing? And so I really ask each one of you, whether it's at this meeting or whether it's calling Casey or myself or any of the committee members, please go through this and look at what excites you, what is the most controversial or challenging, what's missing, and what do you want to prioritize as we move into 2023. And so I'm excited about this work. I want you to be excited about it too, but I want it to be something that all of us can have ownership to. So I just wanted to kind of get those comments out because this is hard work. It's really hard work. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in a direction that this board can support and have ownership of once we do the strategic action plan. So with that, I'll shut up and I'll start listening.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, please. There are 3 focus areas of this action plan. One is on internal operations. The second is on programs, so all of the external facing work that we do, and the third on board practices. And so I'm going to ask Eric Johnson to go through operations, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Casey. So there's 3 goals in the operations area, and the first 2 really have to do with people at SACOG, and the third one has to do with procurement. So I'll start by going through the first goal, which is to establish a safe and inclusive workplace for all current and future employees. And the objectives that we've proposed here really focus on 2 important things. One is training, and I think it's partly training for how staff do the job for what the rest of this plan is setting out, but also general training to understand the diversity of the people in the region that we serve. And then the other important thing is understanding who works at SACOG. And so doing a better job of just keeping track and reporting on the demographics of our staff and who's applying to work at SACOG. The second goal is to identify and attract, invest in, and retain a workforce that reflects the diversity. And so this is looking prospectively out to, do people know what SACOG is? Our intention is not to make SACOG a household name, but yet we want to make sure that people who are skilled and able to do the jobs that we have here know that this is a place that that they would be welcomed and that they know that there's opportunities here. And so this is looking at how we promote jobs at SACOG and ensuring that that's well known, and also giving training to staff to understand, what are some of the implicit biases that we all have in going through the recruitment and hiring processes, and how do we avoid applying those when we're looking at people's qualifications. And then the third goal really focuses, as I said, on procurement. And so we'd like to look at and assess SACOG's procurement and contracting practices, acknowledging off the bat that this is really something where there are state and federal restrictions on how SACOG's money can be used, how we can consider race and other protected categories. But again, here, just ensuring that there's more transparency and clarity about what business opportunities there are to work with SACOG. And then if there are things that we have set up that just make it harder to do work with SACOG, or maybe make it unnecessarily difficult for all types of businesses to bid on our work, that we look at those and then we try to reduce those barriers so that we are creating more access for people to do business with us. And we're also not wasting taxpayer dollars by having overly burdensome procurement and contracting practices. So I'm happy to see if there's any questions in the overall operations area before turning it over to Casey.
And again, anything what you see is challenging or controversial. Sorry. Challenging or controversial, what you're excited about, anything missing, what would you prioritize, are also of interest.
All right, any observations?
Chair, if I may, Director Joyner.
Yes, Paul.
Really just an observation. I really appreciate Eric's explanation of each of these. As I look through this, I'll just acknowledge that reading goal number 2 concerned me. My desire for this organization is to have the very best people we can get in the organization. Your explanation of wanting to throw out a bigger loop, inform a lot more people of what we do here and the availability of employment here, I'm perfectly good with. When I just read that little red line, it makes me very, very nervous. I don't want us directing away from seeking the best, most capable people we can get within the organization, no matter what. And so I appreciate your explanations. It helps me a lot.
Okay. Very good. Other comments? Darren?
Thank you, Chair Saylor. I was going to wait, but I think I'm going to jump in here. And Director Joyner, I really appreciate your comment. And I just want you to know, I don't think there's any intention about, lowering that expectation about getting the best trained staff. I think in general, I think that the team and the committee has been working really hard to make sure that we're just creating an environment, and this goes beyond just the internal organization of SACOG, but everywhere within SACOG and throughout its directors, our mission. We want to create an all boats rise type of mentality. The more people we bring in, the more people that we're able to set up for success, those that maybe have not been on that equal playing field, so to speak, if we give them a little bit of help so that they can compete, then we will have an all boats rising type of thing, and we will succeed as a region. And so I do appreciate, because I mean, all this is delicate because it's, everybody's got their own experiences, and so bringing that to the table. And so seeing things in writing, policy affects blindly everything. And so I can appreciate your perspective, but I just want you to know, I don't believe anybody's trying to compromise on talent. I think we're actually trying to expand the pool of that talent, make sure we're looking more broadly. And I think the committee and staff has been working really hard to do that, and not, tip things any particular way, but again, making it more broadly, creating more opportunities for everybody, greater opportunities for success, and thereby creating more success for the entire region. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Any other comments on the operations goals? Thank you. Good comments, both of you. Thanks. What's next, Casey?
Okay, then moving on to programs, we have 3 goals in the programs focus area. So this first goal here is about engagement. And this we heard very loudly from REI working group members and from stakeholders who do not work in government, that government across the board and SACOG, your government, you need to work harder at engaging communities that have been marginalized or are marginalized. So that is, and you see in the goal statement, it pulls back into the communities that are identified in your racial equity statement, along with low income, rural, urban, and other underrepresented communities. The point being, I think maybe to borrow from some of Director Soon's comments just now, to really try to cast a broader net. And so the objectives that you see within that goal are about trying to do that with more specificity. The first one of investing in and strengthening partnerships with community representatives and organizations speaks to the fact that SACOG does not deliver direct services. So it's not, I'm going to use Eric's statement. It's not SACOG trying to become a household name, but it's really trying to work with those organizations that already may know their communities better and establishing some regular communication and relationship with them so that we can have a better understanding of where communities are at. The second objective that is focused on the blueprint engagement really is acknowledging that we are about to launch on the development of this blueprint plan. The blueprint is what it is called, but it is your long-range transportation plan. It is really what sets the vast majority of SACOG's work program, for several years. And so as we are about to embark on that, this is saying that we need to explicitly try to develop our outreach and engagement to engage communities of color and underrepresented communities. And then finally, our third objective is acknowledging that one of the, first, SACOG is already required to reach out to tribal governments through the development of our long-range plan, but even that has been very hit and miss over the years. And so in acknowledging that tribal stakeholders or tribal governments are an important stakeholder to us, to really try to ramp up our efforts at engaging them. Next goal, please, is number 2. This is focused on increasing funding for programs and projects that prioritize race equity and inclusion and or specifically engage underrepresented and underserved communities in the region. Because this is something else that we heard, is that we are a very diverse region, and this is a racial equity action plan focused on race first. We also have communities that have historic inequities that have to do with with income, with distance, with rural and urban divide. And so that's, we are trying to make sure that we are capturing that in this goal. And the objectives that you see listed out here really try to get to that. The first one is through the blueprint update to try to formalize a long-term commitment to support, engage, empower, implement. That is the funding program that you created out of your last regional funding round. The second objective is really investing in future leadership and talent. So we will call out the Youth Leadership Academy here because we think it is actually a really good success and step that we need to build on, as well as trying to better connect with all of the different professional organizations in the region that are also creating their own pipelines of people into their profession. And then the third of these objectives is to evaluate SACOG's major programs and planning work to identify opportunities to increase racial equity and reduce disparities. This is if we need to be able to know what it is that we are trying to change. So really we need to set a baseline of measurement. And then lastly, goal 3, SACOG supports and learns from member and local partner agencies incorporating racial equity best practices in their planning work. This is another statement that came, I'd say, from both public sector stakeholders as well as those in the community, that SACOG as a council of governments does convene local governments can provide service and assistance to those to our members, but we also have members who are very far ahead and have been doing racial equity work and inclusion work for a long time. And so our goal is really to both to create a learning community out of that. So for SACOG and other members to be able to learn as well as to share best practices. And the objectives there really try to lay out steps for us to be able to get to that goal. With that, that's this end of our program's goals. I want to pause to see if there are any questions or comments on that before I hand it over to James on our third and last focus area.
Thanks, Casey. Vice Chair Desmond, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, certainly, and thank you for all this important work that's gone into this. On the goal number 1 about the engagement, you know, my fellow directors have heard me mention this a few times. My supervisory district is very large, about 290,000 residents who live in unincorporated areas, and there are 2 environmental justice communities within my district. So it's underrepresented in so many different ways, including just the governance structure. You know, that one advocate for that many people makes things much worse for everything. But my question is, in terms of the engagement, will that engagement be out geographically? Is your vision that the engagement would be going actually out into these communities and meeting directly, or would this be virtual engagement, or what do you envision?
Well, if I point to the first objective there, where we're talking about investing in and strengthening partnerships with community representatives, leaders, and organizations. So we do want to try on the long term to identify those leaders, and honestly, with your help, with the help of all of our board members, who are the leaders or organizations in different communities, who are serving different communities, that we could try to establish some ongoing relationship with, so that when we do the work of SACOG, when we do we're doing a funding round, or we're doing a long range plan update, or anything that we are doing, that we have a way to receive the public input that is tailored to and through those hopefully those relationships that we are able to establish with those community-based organizations, if that helps.
No, that's helpful. That's actually kind of the answer I was hoping for. I mean, I hope that it will be certainly coordinated with the respective director, and my hope is that my engagement will help SACOG's goals, and SACOG's engagement will help my goal as a representative of these communities as well. So just want to make sure that we continue to have the discussion and coordination as that engagement occurs. Thank you.
And Vice Chair Desmond, I would also, I think Casey said it, but I want to emphasize, we see a lot of we would like to have stronger network, better relationships with a lot of community-based organizations, faith-based groups around the region, but we're not doing that without your jurisdictions, right? I just want to be very clear. We're doing that by your side, because I do think, so we don't envision going into any of your communities, right? And as SACOG, sort of, we're from SACOG, we're here to help. That is not our intention. We do that with you, we do that with your staff. And frankly, we hopefully build those connections with some of these other organizations, non-governmental organizations that know your constituents just like you do. So that's the idea.
Yeah, no, thank you, James. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that it's not, I mean, obviously most of your interaction at the county level with DOT and other departments. I just want to, kind of just highlight that. And you and I have had this discussion around this issue many, many times. So thanks very much.
Sure. All right, so maybe we'll get to board practice. Here we go. Can we move the slides up? Okay, great. Okay, so last goal around board practice. And again, really appreciate a lot of these ideas coming through the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group from board members and from external stakeholders as well. So I think the first goal is back to one of the themes of the Race Equity Inclusion work and our racial equity statement of commitment and change, which is really listen and learn and understand. What we want to do is be more intentional about using board workshop time to really get a lot of different perspectives on equity and disparities, and have both people come to the board to provide that. We've heard a lot about deepening our understanding of the history of the region and understanding the, we've talked a lot about redlining in 20th century in the run-up of this REI work. And I know that can be sometimes touchy, but I also think it's a remarkable history that we have. And it's something I think that we've heard from a lot of people that they'd like some kind of a deeper insight and to bring some folks with historical perspectives. The other idea that I've also been discussing with some of you, I'm jumping the last objective here, which is an internal study mission. That doesn't have to look like a 3 days within the region. That could look like an offsite board meeting with a tour right after, rotating around the region and actually visiting communities right here in this region, just for example. And then jumping back to objective 1B here, just making sure that we do the primers and the refreshers. We're going to have new board members in January, as we do after every even year election. But just allowing for all of you and our new board members to really understand the work that's done to date, the involvement of the board, so that everybody kind of is brought up to speed. Okay, next goal. All right. Really understanding racial equity as part of the triple bottom line. And this is one I know we talked a lot about through the blueprint development, through at the April board retreat. But if we think about the triple bottom line, and those things actually have those 3 E's, equity, economy, environment, we believe are very interconnected. In some ways, the racial equity work and this action plan is an extension and a deepening of the equity E. So again, for example, bringing community stakeholders in to share their perspectives on SACOG policy issues. We're also trying to establish a community voices committee that would be these kind of community-based organizations. Very important to us. It may seem like a small deal, but it's not. To compensate people for their time, we can do that and make sure we're not over tapping them, but we're just like all of you, we're compensating people for their time. And then it kind of relates to a little bit of what Casey had mentioned earlier on programs, but really understanding some sort of methodology around equity impacts of proposed policy decisions. There's 2 general buckets in my mind around equity and racial equity. And when all of you and your staff are asked, as you are right now, like, what are the equity benefits of the transportation project that you want to get money for? Typically, there's a sort of a process bucket, right? Which is what kind of level of engagement have you done with a community? And there's a data bucket. What are the benefits? What are the positive benefits and the negative impacts that might come with a certain, say, investment in transportation or so those are those 2, and we're going to continue to work on trying to figure out how we can sort of routinize that and get those kinds of assessments and evaluations in front of you when larger policy decisions come before the board, such as the funding round that we just talked about earlier. Okay, next goal. And then the question about how you maintain engagement. What we've discussed a number of ideas. I think what I don't want to do is have an agenda item every board meeting that we sometimes skip over because we don't have an update. In other words, we want these to be meaningful. We want these to be substantive. We want to hold ourselves accountable in terms of implementing this in a way that's helpful, especially to those of you that perhaps that aren't on the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group. And given that we really had 3 goals with the Race Equity Inclusion Working Group, as Chair Jennings knows, and I think we've stuck to them very well. So it was a racial equity statement, it's a racial equity action plan, and figuring out how we can begin to incorporate equity into our blueprint, our long range plan. And we have been consistent, we have been focused. I hope you all appreciate that. So, but I will say too that this REI working group is it's winding down, of course, as the board changes over at the end of this year. And so there's an important question. Should that working group reconstitute next year? Is maybe the role of the working group to think a little bit about differently of external stakeholders and really around implementation? Should we get some of our partners our city managers, our county staff, our transit agencies, but also community-based organizations, philanthropic organizations that are our partners in implementing this. So just not a resolved answer, but a question, which is what's the role of the REI working group and can it play an important role in terms of implementation and accountability? I think that's the last slide here. Yes. Okay. All right. So there you go. That's operations, programs, and board.
Well, let me just make a couple comments. I'm particularly excited. You asked us, Rick, what we are excited about. I'm very excited about this whole goal category on board practices. I really like the idea of the study missions, the internal study missions, having it be a seamless. Let's not have a 3-day thing, but really let's visit Oak Park. Let's go to Live Oak. Let's see what is going on and what the history, the urban geography, the human geography of our region is. I think those are very valuable, make it real kind of exercises, and I really appreciate this set of recommendations. Personally, I'm not so sure that having an item on every single board agenda makes a lot of that can die of its own weight and people stop paying attention. So I think having relevant, important topics come to us on a periodic basis is very good. But having an item just on the agenda, just to have it on the agenda is not I don't think very effective approach. And then the other part about the role of an ongoing race equity inclusion work group, I really hope that we do that. I really hope that we continue the group in some fashion. I really like the concept of having non-SACOG board members engaged in this conversation in the way that they have been. I think brings a real strength to our conversation, to our consideration of these issues. And I'd like to have that group, or some iteration of that group, continue to help us do these study missions, these workshops, to have them continue to examine the processes that the board is involved in for additional ways of making it responsive to the whole array of our regional community. So those are my thoughts. Are there other thoughts from others on any aspect of the topic that we've been discussing? Lynette, is anyone raising their hand?
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay. I'm going to ask if there's any public comment. Are there any members of the public who are with us who would like to comment on this topic?
I don't see any public comment, Chair Saylor.
Okay. Well, Casey, does this do what you wanted to do?
Yes, thank you all for your feedback on this, and we hope we will be back in front of you in October.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. I think you're free to move about the country. We'll see you in a couple weeks. We're adjourned. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Hope to see you at noon.
Okay.